Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am speaking in opposition of this tax increase. That is a surprise, isn't it?
Members, please suspend. Sir, at this time, Representative Roae has the floor. Representative Roae has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, this tax increase proposal, 95% of it is paid for by working people. 95%. The other 5% is a severance tax. Mr. Speaker, I remember last fall, there was a gentleman driving around the state of Pennsylvania in a Jeep, and he said Pennsylvania is the only state that doesn't have a severance tax. He said because of that, we're leaving $1 billion on the table that could be for education. Mr. Speaker, this proposal raises $67 million this fiscal year from a severance tax. By doing the math, I guess that leaves $933 million on the table. But Mr. Speaker, when the gentleman was driving the Jeep around, he made it sound like he wanted drillers to pay about $1 billion a year more. Well, here we are a year later, and what this proposal is we're voting on today, people pay $1 billion a year more. Actually, about $1.4 billion a year. So, Mr. Speaker, the mandate that the gentleman got from the voters because he was going to tax drillers $1 billion a year later, it's really hardworking people are going to pay $1.4 billion a year more. Classic example of bait and switch. Mr. Speaker, the personal income tax never needs to be increased, ever. Mr. Speaker, I've never voted for a personal income tax increase. They haven't done one here for 10 or 15 years, but it goes up almost every year. It's called inflation. Every year, over time, as salaries grow, we're collecting the same percentage on a higher amount of money. Back in 1971, there was a 2.3% personal income tax. The median household income in the United States was $9,030. So a typical person would have paid $208 in Pennsylvania personal income tax. Mr. Speaker, if we still had that same tax rate today, the typical household would pay $1,202. But that's not what we do. The rate is now 3.07%. So that same person that was paying $208 back in 1971, they're paying $1,604 today. But some people think that's not good enough. They think we need to raise it again. If we go to the 3.57%, that same household would be paying $1,865. If we grow the budget at the same rate as incomes grow, we would never have to change a percentage-based tax. All we have to do is have the Pennsylvania budget grow at the same pace that paychecks are growing. It is completely unfair for our constituents if they're only making, a little bit more every year for us to, the fair thing is to have the same tax rate every year. As they make a little bit more, the tax rate automatically adjusts for inflation. We charge them a little bit more. But we shouldn't be collecting a higher percentage just because we spend more money than we should be spending. Pennsylvania is already the 10th highest tax state in the country. You look at 40 other states, they have schools, hospitals, state parks, roads, medical programs, human services programs. 40 other states do all of those things for less money than we charge to do the exact same thing. Mr. Speaker, I would question, are employers more likely to come to Pennsylvania if we have higher taxes? Does anybody believe that companies are going to say, oh, Pennsylvania just raised their personal income tax, maybe we should move there? Are people that are looking for jobs, are they going to say, oh, I want to go to a state that has a higher personal income tax rate? It's not likely, Mr. Speaker. I think most of us campaign on we want to help businesses create jobs. Well, if we want to help businesses create jobs, you don't do that by raising taxes. It really comes down to the same old thing. What is our problem in Harrisburg? Are we taxing too little or are we taxing too much? I think we're taxing too much. I think this legislation here would tax even more, so we'd be taxing even more too much. In terms of the severance tax, Mr. Speaker, I just want to point out, should there be a special tax just on one type of business? Drillers pay the exact same taxes all other companies pay. In addition to that, they also pay an impact fee that only drillers pay. So you have these companies, they pay the same thing everybody else pays. On top of that, there's an impact fee. And some of you folks want to slap another tax on top of all that. Is that really the right thing to do? Should we do that county by county in the state? Should we pick an industry in every section of the state and give that industry an extra tax just because they're doing well? If hardwood lumber is doing real well in some part of the state, we could have a special tax on them. If pharmaceuticals are doing well, we could have a special tax on that. We could just go around the state, whatever type of company is doing the best, we could just have a special tax on them. Or we could have responsible budgets with responsible spending levels and not charge companies extra taxes. As far as the credit downgrades, some people say we need this legislation so we can prevent further credit downgrades. People say that if we have a poor bond rating, it'll be harder for the state to borrow money. Well, I was thinking about that. In Pennsylvania, we have about a $17 billion unfunded liability in the retiree health insurance plan. We have about $121 billion in state, county, and local debt. We have about a $55 billion unfunded liability in CSRS and PSRS. We have a $10 billion unfunded liability in municipal pension plans. That's $203 billion that Pennsylvania taxpayers are on the hook for. So if it's harder for us to borrow money, I think that's a good thing. I don't think we should be borrowing more money. And if somebody tells me that if we vote for this tax increase, it'll be easier for me to put my kids in debt, I don't want to do that. So I think that's a poor excuse for why we should force a massive tax increase on the taxpayers just to make it easier for Pennsylvania to borrow more money. But the numbers I want to leave you with, your constituents are going to pay 95% of the tax increase. People that are truck drivers, teachers, office workers, waitresses, accountants, they're paying 95% of the increase. Drillers pay 5% of it. This is a tax increase on all of our constituents. I strongly urge a no vote. Thank you.